Originally, this talk was going to be on metaphysical healing, which deals with life. But we may as well deal with the other side of it, because life as we know it or as we interpret it will not last that long. Let's say 100 years if we are fortunate. And if you're in ill health, well, then it's not so fortunate. But there's no reason theoretically why we should not live a full lifespan. But naturally, we understand that death is at the end of the corridor. And so how to deal with that is the central theme of all religions and spiritual practices. It really is the basis of philosophy that deals with the meaning of life itself. So naturally, when a beloved one passes away, we call it this, you see. Even our language is diplomatically softened. Passing away is the term we use. But let's stick with it. When a beloved one is passing away or has passed away, naturally we grieve. And the Bhagavad Gita tells us that the wise grieve. They grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. And in bereavement counseling, when I bring this up, what is your worldview approach to death? What is your spiritual view or philosophical view of death? And how will we comfort those people who are bereaved? I quote this passage with a little bit of a naughty twinkle in my eye, I have to admit. But Krishna meant it. He meant the wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead, because philosophically there's no reason for it. And then all the Upanishads, or many of the Upanishads, are to deal with the subject of grief and relieving grief and mortality and immortality. But you see, my answer to those who are astonished by the statement, the wise grieve neither for the living or the dead, I have to point out we are not wise. And then what makes a person wise and what makes them not? It is the level of attachment that we have, or to put it another way, the interpretation of who we are. And this interpretation of who we are and where is a supreme being and the separation between the two is so well entrenched in religious thought, in orthodox religious thought, it's very difficult to change it. And society persuades us about our individuality. And so when you talk about attachment, we're talking about attachment to the body, attachment to behaviors, habits, attachment to cultural standards and norms, attachment to certain types of food, attachment to relatives, attachment to friends, attachment to family, even attachment to your cat. These can all be attachments. And for those who are misers, attachment to things and belongings. So the difficulty is this attachment. And the basis for this attachment is a wrong interpretation of this world. Now, our philosophy and all our talks are directed at theoretically removing this and bringing us to a better way of understanding. We call this knowledge. Not intellectual knowledge, but it turns out to be like that. Because if you have an intellectual understanding of something, you can reason it out and you can easily come to a logical, reasonable conclusion. But attachment is not about reason. It's about feeling. And when we feel an attachment, then it's very difficult then to deal with something when that attachment is severed, physically severed. And so there are some other philosophical understandings we have to bring in from a number of different areas. Firstly, our understanding is that we are on a journey, and the journey doesn't stop with the vehicle that we have, called the earth car, if you will, the physical body, our transport section. When that breaks down, and it will, for all of us it will. The body is chemically not designed to live forever, and so we have certain long strands which become shorter as we age, And that is nature's way of saying, okay, it's time to give way, move on, but it doesn't end there because there's a renewal of it. And this renewal is worth reflecting on. And I often say, and I remind you, that even physically, there's no such thing as death. Simply molecules disperse back into the elements and take a different form. That's all that happens. But if you don't think that we have a central purpose and we're all having the same purpose, long-range purpose, that is our own freedom, our own liberation from all sufferings, from all attachments, and sufferings are caused by attachments. And attachment goes with the other dimension of this, which is pleasure. You cannot have attachment without pleasure. The pleasure of somebody's company, the pleasure of being able to talk to them, and then the disappointment when that gets severed, that we call grief. So, practically speaking, we have to deal with the grief, not from an intellectual point of view, but from a compassionate point of view, for those who are grieving, who don't have the philosophy. It's not good saying to somebody, oh, but you see, there's no such thing as death, and the person will live on in some traditions in a post-mortem condition in the heaven or something like that. They'll meet all the relatives and so on, and we'll meet up in heaven. That's normally a theological solution to this. But so that's all in principle. But the fact is that we have felt a loss and we feel a loss. And so we have to make sure that there is a compassion for those who are grieving. We ourselves might be also grieving, but then we have to look at it from the philosophical point of view about death and allow that to change the feeling about it. So we have to remind ourselves very often that although there's no such thing as physical death, only transformation of things, of matter, but there is also a progression, a pilgrimage that we are all on. And therefore, the person is not gone, and therefore we can still pray for their continued success on their pilgrim journey. That's the best thing that we can do for the person who is so-called departed. And it's like going on your pilgrimage journey, the vehicle breaks down, the instrument is no longer capable of continuing. But you see, this is where our idea of transmigration is helpful. Because what happens is we understand if there's a continuum, a life journey, then we know that they will get another vehicle. And if the attachment is there, there's a strong likelihood, I think, that that person will come back in our environment. Eventually, we all have to come back and complete our journey as a human being. In the meantime, there are other parallel universes, if you like. Even modern science is keen on this idea of parallel universes. Some of them are calculated to be vaster than the number of atoms in the observable universe, namely 10 to the power of 80 is the number of atoms. It's calculated that there may be 10 to the power of 500 universes. But that's just a mathematical trick. In any event, the principle of parallel universes comes very, very close to the idea of a post-mortem realm where we live out, where we gather or we reap the benefits of our life. And most people that we know of live a reasonably good life. And we don't gain any more from it. We just spend our pocket money, our merits of what we lived, but we do eventually have to come back. Most people, anyway. Unless you're a thoroughly degraded person, in which case you may come back as, a lesser being. So this is a wonderful practical understanding that is also comforting for us, because it could come back as somebody's child. We could encounter this. It could come within the same kind of family as a newborn. So people say, so and so died, where did they go? And my answer is, well, I don't know. But what I do know is they're better off. They're in a better place. They're no longer suffering with the body in whatever condition they were suffering from. They're getting a brand new vehicle. So that if you ask, what kind of vehicle would you like? Well, I'm hoping for I don't know, at least a 2024 Tesla, something like that. I'm not advertising, but some kind of modern car. Why would I want to stick with this rusty old thing? So it's much better to get a brand new, better instrument and continue your journey. Your journey hasn't stopped. We have to be convinced there is a purpose of life, which is there to discover our pristine, absolute nature, where there is absolutely no death, no birth, no life in itself. And until we understand that lesson, then we will continue gathering our experiences and progressing more and more and more. And our philosophy says every atom itself is doing it. On Monday, I gave a talk to a group in France um, about this very subject of karma, reincarnation, and so on and so forth, all of these kinds of things. And every religious system has this query: where does a person go to? But it's a bit like saying, well, there's the Irish radio broadcasting, let's say RTE, and your transistor breaks down, the broadcast stops, and then you ask, well, where did the broadcast go? Where is the broadcast going? Or if you update the example, the broadcast and the internet is there. And when your computer breaks down, well, where does the World Wide Web go to? It's not going anywhere. It's always there. It's just the tuning is no longer there. And we have to get another tuning mechanism. All of these are useful in giving us a perspective. But then you see, we also have to have the grieving as well. One of the reasons why men may have statistically more heart attacks than women is because culturally, in many cultures anyway, they're not permitted to grieve. They're not permitted to let the grief feelings out. Let it come out. Let it happen. And it'll happen by itself anyway, in terms of anniversaries, in terms of family gathering occasions, and so on and so forth. The great expert on this that I keep quoting would be the late and great medical doctor Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who made a great study of death and dying, written many books on it, and really has become the standard understanding of it. Now, we have enough evidence, scientific evidence, to validate things called near-death experiences. And that is when we question consciousness and misunderstand that it is linked with the instrument of it, namely the brain. This materialistic reductionist point of view does not really work when we do an investigation with countless accounts, tried, tested, verified, examined, of near-death experiences, which are all positive. It is all with common factors of going toward a light, helping hands bringing you up, meeting relatives, clinically being dead, and then coming back. So we do have a real understanding of what happens when the eyes close and we go off. And as I always say, every night we have a dress rehearsal for it. Every night we go into a vacation of our own personality, and going into a state of adventure, a dream, and then into a state of kind of blank peacefulness where consciousness alone exists. And the real observing entity That is what religion calls God, not that entity that is a extra cosmic being looking over us. We have to change our orthodox thinking on it. Then we'll come on to healing and the relation to what I'm saying to do with healing or metaphysical healing. But we have to understand and we have to be convinced that death is not the end. It is not something like a skeleton in the cupboard that is to be avoided and repressed. Not at all. It is something that has to be faced with a great deal, not just of fortitude, but welcoming. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross will tell us, a person does not release the body until they are ready to do it. That's her study. And then we have enough understanding of near-death experiences, and this is contained in our Upanishads, a very clear description, even though we have to use human interpretation for it. The two paths, and one path is the path toward the sun, toward the moon. The moon symbolizes a reflection of the reality, a kind of borrowed light which comes back to us. And those people, we live with the ancestors, having gone through, and it describes a number of realms, lightning and light and various other descriptions are there. And these are simply the way that the rishis were explaining something like a near-death experience. But those who are close to liberation, to freedom, will go along the line of the sun to the world of Brahma. Brahma is the mythological way of saying cosmic mind. That is the personal God. Those devotees of Jesus will go to Jesus Loka, that heaven. Those devotees of Ramakrishna will go to Ramakrishna Loka. And that cosmic mind is then on the border, if you will, of freedom. And those people will either be reborn as great yogis and great spiritual leaders, or they will simply graduate toward their true nature and pass on. In any event, freedom is there for them. The other people will have to be born again and go through, unfortunately, the gamut of suffering and pain and pleasure syndrome going through life until they learn, I am that. That's a wonderful thing. And no effort is lost. No effort is lost. It's not that we have to start from a new page. It's like, as I say, you're going to the airport, your taxi breaks down, you get another taxi and you continue your journey. The purpose is there of journey. Now, in terms of healing, therefore, there's a very important thing, and this is dealt with by Joel Goldsmith. I often quote Joel Goldsmith because he is he's a Western Vedantan who speaks in Christian language. And for a wider audience, sometimes we have to modify that language. But what he's saying up front in terms of metaphysical healing, and he has a chapter on it in his book, Infinite Way. And he says like this, he says, healings are always in proportion to our understanding of the truth about the divine, man, idea, body. Healing has nothing to do with someone out there. There's no independent healing mechanism. And there's no separate person out there called a patient. So when anyone asks for spiritual help or healing, that ends his part in what follows until he acknowledges his so-called healing. And we're not concerned with the so-called patient. So-called patient. There is no person who is defective. You see, every time we have a culture of negativity, things are wrong and have to be corrected. Theologically, this goes back to a kind of concept of original sin. We are defective and we need saving. We need lifting up. We need rescuing. But the Vedantic point of view doesn't have this in mind at all. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. This is full and that is full. From fullness comes fullness. You can't add or take away from fullness. It is always there. The problem is we never see the totality. We only see the fragments. And these fragments are what are coming and going. The totality is the glory of the divine. So when you say, this person, what a tragedy, it's a patient out there, and we have to learn to readjust our thinking and put this individuality into the total perspective. And that is an area, if you like, even the language is awkward. Our fullness, it is complete fullness. And we have no experience of fullness, we only have ideas about it. The sky, for example, space. The more we explore space, the vaster it becomes. Until we have this dichotomy that when you do a triangulation, we see that Einstein's three alternatives, whether it is a flat universe, which means it is infinite, it goes on forever, or whether it is less than that kind of negative, in which case it's not infinite, it's finite, or a saddle shape or a spherical shape and so on and so forth. But you see, we want the universe to be finite, and yet we find it's infinite. This is the dichotomy of modern science. It seems it goes on forever because from our point of view, our small point of view, it looks like separate fragments here and there. And so when we take medical advice, we're coming from a point of view of deficit. And when we talk about so-called metaphysical healing, we're not talking of a deficit situation. We're not interpreting a patient or a person out there. So every time really you take some medication, some chemical, you're putting your faith in yourself at the fundamental level of totality is gone. Because by putting your faith in outside objects, you're telling the body it's no good, and yet it's an instrument. And even though it may be plagued with disease, even though as you get older, and I'm experiencing this of late, then the body becomes a little creaky and you discover, oh, there's this problem, there's that problem, all kinds of things come in. Despite the fact you expect it. Just like you expect a car to eventually not be able to pass the road test, what is it called, the NCT. So they examine the car all the time. They're examining my car maybe every 3 or 6 months and making this determination. And I'm sitting there and saying, nodding and saying, yes, 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 okay. But internally, what am I thinking? Internally, I'm thinking something completely different. Internally, I'm thinking full and free and perfect. And I'm topping up with thankfulness. So we have to be thankful that a person is released from suffering. And we have to be thankful that a person is going toward a better place. And we should feel thankful that this person is continuing their journey in a better condition. And we wish them well. And we pray for them. We wish them well. May they be successful on their continued journey. And if it's the divine will, maybe we'll meet in a different form, even physical form, in a subsequent rebirth. So you see, this idea behind it all is that we are concerned only with the truth of being, not the individuality. And the truth of what religion calls God, the truth of man, the truth of idea, the truth of body. And so the truth in our consciousness is the divinity within and through and beyond. And when we do that, we see this divine has a healing influence. The failure to heal is a result of a lot of misknowledge of the truth about these things. about the divinity, about man, humans that is, about the idea, about the body. And this misknowledge comes primarily from our orthodox religious beliefs, which served a purpose as some kind of structure at some point. But we now have to broaden it out. We have to outgrow these ideas. Just as when you build a building, you outgrow, the building outgrows the support structures, the scaffoldings. There is only one answer to the question then of this superstition that is holding us back, and that is an answer, what is God? What is this divine? That the answer is, biblically speaking, I am. And when we say I am, we're not talking of body, we're not talking of the psyche, the mind, we're not talking of behavior, we're not talking of attributes, we're not talking of ancillary things such as environment. God is the mind and the life of the individual. We have to be convinced of that. And any mental hedging or inner reservation about that subject will result in ultimate failure of healing. There's but one universal, whether it's being spoken by one person or another, whether it's being spoken by Krishna or Jesus or, I don't know, John Smith. The revelation that he that seeth me, seeth him that sent me. That is a very revealing statement that Jesus had made. It's a universal principle. And there must be no quibbling in our own minds about this. We either understand this truth or we don't. And if you don't, there's no need for you to seek any further reason for why things are not healing within you. This is to do with metaphysical healing, this subject. I am the way, the truth, and the life is something Jesus said, but it's applicable to all of us. Unless you can accept this as a principle, the truth about you and every individual that you encounter has no foundation upon which to stand. The truth is that this divine is the mind and the life of the individual. God is the only I. God is the only I. Now, in doing this, I'm reading from The Infinite Way. This is Joe Goldsmith's, largely Joe Smith's words, which I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Then he says, next comes the question, what is man? And the answer is that man is idea, that's all. The individual, just an idea. It's a body, it's a manifestation. My body is just idea or manifestation. Same thing with my business, my home, my wealth. These only exist as an idea. You're thinking it's a reality. You're thinking that it is complete, and reality means permanent. It won't go away. So he continues, for this reason, for no other, my body is the exact image and likeness of my consciousness and reflects or expresses the qualities, character, and nature of my own consciousness of existence. So far then, we understand that I am God, that has to be endorsed, that God is the mind and life of the individual, and that body exists as the idea of God. God, or I am, is universal, it's infinite, it's omnipotent, it's omnipresent. Therefore, the idea body is equally indestructible, imperishable, and eternal. Now, is there a contradiction in this? The body perishes. How can you declare it to be imperishable? It is because it is something like a fragmentation. I'm not reading now, it's my own language. A fragmentation, as it were, a manifestation of that one divinity. It is not separate. This idea of a duality, we are here and God is there. That has to be replaced by the idea of a totality, where we declare that everything that we formerly identified and labeled as an individuality whether it's an individual person or whether it is individuals that you meet on a day-to-day basis, or whether it is the fragment that you call the home, or whether it is the fragment that you call even the weather, or the sun, or the moon, or a location. These are all manifestations of one divine essence. This has to be our conviction, because without this conviction, we won't get out of the trouble. And the trouble represents itself as confusion, as suffering, as difficulties, as struggle, and it goes on as long as our thinking does not change. Even the Bhagavad Gita, and I point this out many times, Krishna declares, I am gastric fire, I am Vaishvana. That means God sits in the stomach as gastric fire and digestion of food. Why is that? Only because he has a purpose for us. That's another conviction that we have. So every individual will have a purpose, specifically designed, so that we fit in a way, in a harmonious way, a role to play that nobody else can play. And the body itself, it doesn't have any discrimination. The stomach processes poison as well as food, you know that. The creative part of the mind is not the discriminating portion. You are the discriminating power. You, the I am. So therefore we have to choose the right thing. And most of our illnesses, many, I would say most, somebody tried to put it statistically as 60%, 70% of our maladies are psychological. It's not to say that they don't manifest in the body, they do. Anxiety will manifest in the body. Worry will manifest in the body. The hatred will manifest in the body, and anger will manifest in the body. So real mental and physical healing doesn't depend on willpower. We can't force it. It depends on a new way of thinking. Intellectual work doesn't increase the metabolism. No energy is expended in the thinking process, but the thinking process is available to us in order to elevate the mind, elevate the mood, and therefore reform the body, which we can see as a number of atomic structures that are like sparks of the divine. We view it in that way. So there are a number of people, devotees, and they are suffering from maybe some things that might ordinarily frighten them. You know, the big C is a frightening term. And doctors have a habit of using it and alarming you. But you see, many of these things are because we don't or we haven't seen the body as an illuminating, for the time being, divine instrument that plays its role and that is infused with life, divine life, and comes out as atoms and cells that are so intricately complex, so divinely arranged. You would wonder, why does a person fall ill? Now there was the great scientist Alexis Carrel, I'm sure I've told you about him before. Alexis Carrel writes the book Man the Unknown, and he was a Nobel Prize winner for his work on keeping chicken cells, heart cells, alive almost indefinitely. 10 years he kept them going, way beyond a chicken's lifespan, by bringing in exact, right, calculated quantities of nutrients into the cell and taking off exact waste products from it. Keeping the heart cells alive, showing that if we exactly bring in the right nutrients and if we expel the right waste products, theoretically we can keep these cells going forever. And he extrapolated that and said, if it works for the chicken, why not man? Well, we know that nature has an inbuilt aging process, which ends in, okay, that's it, purpose gone. Another way of saying, well, the Lord has fulfilled the purpose so far. Now we bring it back. But in the meantime, is there something we can do to align with our purpose and align with a healthy instrument so that it can be useful for ourselves, for others, and really to manifest the glory of the divine? When Jesus asked, this man is blind from birth, is it his fault or the fault of his parents? Is another way of saying, was it his previous incarnation that produced this? The fruits of this karma, what we call prarabdha karma, the arrow of action or thought went. We can't bring it back. It has to arrive here, and we have to go through it. We have to spend it. And the future we can control. The sanchita karma is yet to come. It hasn't come to us. It may come in the future. But right now, anything in the future that is not preordained, as it were, by us, pre-arranged, the effects have not yet come. This we can control. We can put in the right thought here and now. And we can monitor what negative thoughts are going through the mental field at any given time. And we can observe it. We can put a pause on it. Like running a movie. We put a pause on it and then put some new movie in there. There are some people who dream that, you wake them up. Oh, wait, I'm going back. I want to complete part 2, part 3. So the cells actually can remain immortal. According to Alexis Carrel, and according to all the logic we have, provided the liquid in the cells, the plasma, can be kept in purity. That's our conclusion. What ruins it is ruinous thinking. So distracted thinking has a number of effects. It makes us tired. And if you can do your work in an enraptured way, enthusiastic way, you'll need less food and you'll need less sleep. There'll be less wastage of energy also. There are people that I know of, people I encountered on my last trip, and they're in such a job that they deem to be stressful. And no doubt there are situations which can trigger off stress in us. But the test is, can we look at things in a different way? And whatever work we're doing, can we raise it to a rapturous level where there'll be no strain? And when doing one job and wanting to do another will create a friction and makes us tired. So it's important to have job satisfaction, but it requires a way of thinking that we are doing all actions for the divine, and all actions are using energy which does not belong to the individual. So therefore, try to do with rapture everything that you do. And I often use the example, and I use it with a particular devotee who likes golf, you see. So, why are you feeling tired? You only did mental activity today. That doesn't spend any energy. It's because anxiety spends the energy and you're doing something abstractedly. And when you know, you would prefer to be on the golf course. Or people who have the opportunity to listen to these things that I'm saying, but the sunshine is out there, they'd rather be at the beach. So same thing in work. See, you're doing work and enjoying it, introducing the same joy that you would have for the person on the golf course. Healthy living is really having the right kind of emotion. You can watch your thought pictures. The pituitary gland responds to our thoughts. So we have to cultivate positive emotions that will produce the maximum number of positive hormones. The endocrine glands are there. They respond to your thoughts, not only to your physical exercise that is necessary, But you see, if you doubt, the pituitary will also be a doubting pituitary. It'll respond accordingly. As soon as you fear, the pituitary creates trouble. So we have to believe in the divine, believe in God, that God knows, if we want to personalize this, that God knows what to do for you at the right time, and everything will be all right. In order to create more confidence, try to trust this manifested, glorious thing called the body. The divine has equipped it. Life means the architectural structure within the cell, it's called DNA, is there. It is fully arranged. And the DNA means that all the possibilities which we could ever need for our lives are already present in every cell of the body. We can imagine it as a kind of, and I introduce this sometimes into meditation, that we can imagine the body to be a kind of series of starbursts or a series of sparks, illuminated things. So there are two layers in the mind, and unless they both coincide, some part of the body will break down. These two layers, the conscious and the unconscious. All the developments you will ever have are already within you. So we have to learn to play the right tape, or the right CD, or the right analogy you like, the right music, if you will, and your troubles will be over. Just hand over the pituitary. The body is the temple of the divine. This has always to be understood. And when you believe that God is within, then the pituitary will be able to take over and do its work properly. If you haven't understood, I've deviated way. I've closed the Infinite Way book from Joel Goldsmith. I'm now talking more personally. So we have to assert, God has made me for the purpose which only I can fill. I'll find my own level and do the job for which I was created. And when you want to see this beautifully described, then pick up this game, the game of life and how to play it, by Florence Scovel. Her introduction is exactly like that. So the moment you start disliking your neighbor or your job or your some other thing, then functional disease is already on the way. For instance, the ear, if it doesn't want to hear, and the eye doesn't want to see, then you'll have eye trouble, ear trouble. If you harbor hatred, the heart will hate the blood, and the pituitary will find the weakest part of the body to use as a dumping ground for wrong or excess hormones. And that some people interpret it as, oh, it's a degenerative disease, or your parents would have it, it's hereditary. No, it's just the only hereditary part is the vulnerable area within the body. So when somebody complains of something, then there's only one way to help. You have to get them to remember God is already inside, doesn't need help. You make the person harmonious inside, put in your positive expressions, whatever they may be, and affirm that God is right and God is powerful, doesn't need correction. See that the person that is in front of you is calm by whatever means you feel appropriate, practical means. So that when somebody comes to me and says, I have this problem, that problem, so on and so forth, I lend a sympathetic air. I say, what a pity, oh, never mind. Put my head like this, and then here has a handkerchief, put a coat back here, do something else there. Inside, what am I thinking? I'm thinking, Lord, you're there in totality, you don't require my help. You're already perfect, full and free. There's no defect in you. So we have to first calm the person down and tactfully, confidently introduce these thoughts to the person. By the way, something is digesting your food. What is that? Feel your pulse. What is that? Is that not God beating your drum called the heart, investing life because He has a purpose for you? Now, this method works, and this is what I mean by metaphysical healing. If you look at the past beauties, then beauty is registered here in the present. Pick up the most inspiring things and dwell on them, and then the personality becomes changed. Otherwise, you're dragged into this complaint business. Oh, what a pity. What's wrong? I had a terrible time today at work. This person said this and that person said that. My boss doesn't talk to me correctly. And the whole staff is in uproar. The atmosphere in the office is very bad. Or students come, they're always complaining. They never give me enough time for myself. And so it goes on. But you see, all of this rhetoric is all your own narrative, talking to yourself and persuading yourself of your own negativity. You have to change the personality. You have to re-register everything to the divine. You have to pick up the most inspiring things that you can think of and rather dwell on those things. Don't be persuaded by what a pity. Replace it with what a glory. What you propose to correct in somebody else will be provided your own body or family in order to give you the opportunity to do the correction in yourself, not in others. You see, we are glad of our own discomfort because if you talk, for example, of bereavement, if you have never been bereaved, how will you be able to have any kind of empathy for somebody who is grieving? And so it's a good experience in a way to have that same kind of thing. You'll know that at a funeral, most people are awkward. They don't know what to say. I'm sorry for your loss. What does it mean? It has no meaning. But when you yourself have suffered the severance of attachment, you know what it feels like, and you're able to lend not only empathy, compassion, but hopefully wisdom. And that's the important thing. The end of it is important. So chronic disease can be the result of all that negativity, thinking that you have to correct something. And if, for example, family life is to improve, you must learn to adore and love, not to reform or change. The reactions of our bodies, these are dependent upon our thinking program. And the thinking program about other people, other places, other events. We have to be convinced there are no others. The others are here in your body, the body will react. So we have to create a more unified understanding. And so to get out of a disease that is created like that, we have to insert the daily program to love everything, to enjoy everything. Then the body will become perfect. So for this reason, don't set yourself up as a corrector of things, a corrector of people, but rather as a lover, doer, or server of people. If you're internally healthy, deep down, illness can be eliminated by exercise and meditation, both of these things. And if the deep down personality is unclean, is dirty or disturbed, or struggling and not sound in mind, then meditation, prayer, and exercise will help. We have to cultivate always the opposite thoughts, wave for wave. This is the tried and tested technique that is delivered to us directly in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the handbook, if you will, on the psychological technique of how to deal with disturbances in the mind. When one wave has gone, start your positive thought wave. And when executing the exercises, you are creating a positive wave. All kinds of waves such as mental, emotional, art, economic, these can all be cultivated in the mind. And then the problem will be sorted out. So it's possible only because the observer is there. If the observer wasn't there separate, it's not possible. The waves come and go, but the ocean remains. So we have to stop the robbers, what we call negative thoughts. Stop them inside, and then healing will come. A person obstructs his own or her own healing because they don't change their way of thinking. And so if you have a person with a closed mind about it, then healing will not be possible. There has to be a willingness on the part of it. Anyway, let those who don't wish to be helped associate with their own types. Don't cast your pearls before the swine, in the language of Jesus. If you talk about such things as, I don't know, anemia, anemia occurs when the system is clogged with unwanted material. It's not supplementing something. Oh, I have anemia, let me take iron tablets or something like that. Reducing faith in the body and the Lord's purpose that is being used for in the body, the one that's digesting your food and looking after your cells. Lacking faith, putting doubt in. Don't do that. Don't put wrong pictures in your mind, because you can cause disease. If you talk about dip in energy as often a common problem, well, lack of adrenaline causes lack of enthusiasm and tiredness. But when a person has a dull life, the thyroid isn't active. And when the person has an anxious life, the thyroid becomes overactive. And we have a way of doing that in yoga. We do the Matsyasana, fish posture, and the way you have a chin lock that will correct both an overactive and underactive thyroid. But it has to be done with right thinking, not corrective thinking. For example, if you constantly compare yourself with other people and burn inside, then you'll probably get a concentrated ulcer. Now there's a lady called Louise Hayes who has put a correlationship between all these symptoms and diseases in the physical body to emotional, psychological causes. She's mapped these out comprehensively. See, the body responds to your secret thoughts. When you meet somebody and say hello and strike up conversation, nobody has any clue about what is the secret thoughts, the unspoken thoughts that come up. You may be greeting something and saying, oh, I wish this person would go away. I have to go and do shopping. This person is delaying me. And you're nodding and being polite. But inside your thought is something different. Most of our thoughts are secret. So if your body breaks down in spite of the normal things, for example, exercise, the reason is very clear. You're secretly unhappy. So God made the body. Why not let Him get on with it? Stop being miserable. Put mature ideas inside. Don't secretly compare yourself with others. Don't crumble. Engage in art and religion and reasoning. In order to do that, you must put in positive thoughts against the negatives. That's the standard solution. Put in real thankfulness. Put it in as an insurance against stress diseases. When a person feels tired, it must be because they have a tired thought. And physical conflict will always follow mental conflict. Now, when we talk about art and religion, these are equal to positive thought. So something which is deemed to be almost an incurable disease can be eliminated in 6 months with right thoughts. And there's evidence for this. There was a person suffering from an incurable, so-called clinically incurable disease. He says, since it's incurable, let me do something on my own. Thinking that maybe my condition is due to negative thinking, then Put me in front of comedies, a television, play comedies. Let me have a hearty laugh. And his condition improved, and the so-called incurability aspect of it fell away. So in other words, count your blessings. I think I put it in the thought and prayer today. Make sure that you count your blessings, even write them down, list them. Do some soul searching, because at the right moment, the right thought will be present. And keep a list of those things so that when frustration comes up, you can put in one of these thankful incidents that is already put there, already understood and brought to your attention. So these are some ideas. We have to eliminate our waste products from the body. This is standard maintenance. And if I cannot digest another person's presence outside me, I will not be able to digest my own food inside. There's a big correlation between how we think and what manifests from it. So just in summary now, two subjects being dealt with. One was the original subject I had in mind, which was this metaphysical healing. And the other one was to do with, okay, beyond that, what happens? People are grieving because maybe a young life was taken over. And you know, whether somebody passes away is how our language is. Let's say in their prime, let's say the age of 40 or 30, late 30s, 40s, or what have you. Well, there's always somebody who is grieving because of a life that went before that. Maybe the age of 9 through meningitis or something of that nature. Or maybe some tragedy, and the world is full of those kinds of tragedies. So is it easy to not be attached? No, I'm not saying it's easy. It's something has to be cultivated. We do it patiently, we do it lovingly, but we always bear in mind the perfection which is already there. The fullness and perfection is already there. The totality is there. And we leave the consequences to themselves. Well, I hope that helps. Our time is gone. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.